Hello and welcome to another episode of the Bitcoin News Show. I am your host, Vortex, and you guys have it right here on the World Crypto Network YouTube channel, one of the best places to find information about cryptocurrencies. We got a great show for you guys tonight. We're going to be talking about the Bitcoin ETF. We're talking about China again. China's always in the news, right? We love China. We're talking about some articles from the Digital Currency Group, and we have a special guest on with us tonight, ladies and gentlemen, Ryan Shea from Blockstack. So how you doing, Ryan?
Good. Thank you for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
Awesome, man. Thanks so much for joining us on this Sunday. We got Gabriel Devine joining us. It's been a bit of a long time since we've seen him, so we're really excited to have him back. How you doing, Gabriel?
Great. Thanks for having me, sans beard.
All right. We got Ansel Linder from bitcoinandmarkets.com joining us. Ansel, how you doing?
What's up, Vortex? Thanks for having me.
Yeah, we got a great show. And of course, we got Andrew DeSantis joining us for the first time on this show. We're really excited to have him and hear his opinions. This is a really smart guy. How you doing, Andrew?
Hey, Vortex, how's it going? Thanks for having me.
Yes, sir. So really glad to have him. He's going to get settled in a second there. He's walking around in the beautiful San Francisco area where the weather is nice today, right? All right. So very, very cool. So thanks, guys, so much for joining us. Thanks for being on the show. Ryan, listen, man, I've been following Blockstack for a while, and I gotta say, I really didn't kind of get it until, just a little while ago. So I'm kind of really excited to have you on the show and to talk about it. We're going to be talking a little bit more about your company than we usually do with a special guest company, because Blockstack to me is kind of really interesting, and I think we can really go down the rabbit hole if we want to, but it is the Bitcoin News Show after all, so we do want to get some news in there too. But I think I'm going to ask a couple questions. I'm going to ask a question, and then I'm going to go to the panelists to have them each ask a question for you. So first, just a softball one real quick. Tell us how did you get into Bitcoin?
So I actually first heard about Bitcoin back in like 2011. A friend of mine, he started talking about it, was really excited about it, and he was saying I should check it out. I did, and I kind of hit a few roadblocks, kind of didn't really give much thought to it after that, and kind of it fell by the wayside. And then in 2013, around like April, May, I was hanging out with a few friends. I met this guy who was talking about Bitcoin. He was like super, super excited about it. We were actually working out of this, it was like an individual accelerator, so it wasn't really for startups. It was more for people who wanted to work individuals and accelerate their work, meet new people, etc. And he was really pretty deep into Bitcoin and was talking about all these crazy ideas that everyone was throwing around, and I was like so intrigued by it, and so I had to look deeper into it. At the time, I was starting a business with my co-founder Manib, and we had started a business that had nothing to do with Bitcoin, nothing to do with the blockchain or decentralization. We were just said, hey, look, let's start a business. We're going to get the team right, and we'll figure out everything else from there. And so we knew that we wanted to work with each other, so we started building apps, and we said, look, we're going to build apps. We're going to figure out what sticks. We're gonna find something that we really enjoy working on, and we're gonna make money. And all the while, we kept having conversations about Bitcoin and the blockchain. It was just so interesting. It was fascinating. It was just something that we just had to keep talking about. We also had worked on this. We worked on this project, this application that allowed. It was like a tool to facilitate networking, and it depended. It's like the power networking tool. So you use this app, and then you could reach anyone. You could go through anyone in your network, and eventually get to this person and do sales and BD, right? And it was heavily dependent on Twitter, Facebook, and LinkedIn integrations. And we quickly hit roadblocks, and we were so frustrated with the fact that these companies had such a large lockdown of user data, and they really we saw this world as on the internet there are these fiefdoms, and users and developers are part of the fiefdoms that Facebook, Google, Twitter, LinkedIn, Amazon, all these different companies operate. And that's an unfortunate case where we have these lords that are overseeing these fiefdoms, and then we're the serfs, users and developers. We're completely dependent on these companies for our for how we can access our data and what we can do with it, right? And we saw that as a very big problem, and so we said, okay, look, there are aspects of the internet that we do not like, where we think that it is hampering innovation, it is hurting users, it is hurting developers, it is resulting in consolidation of power, consolidation of wealth, it is resulting in lower privacy, lower security, it is resulting in freedoms being violated, and we need to address this problem. This is something where we can actually tackle it, and so we can make the internet a better place. And as society is becoming more and more digital, as all of our lives are becoming more digital, then we're more dependent on the internet. And so that's really because it's something where we can improve life in general and kind of detach us from these lords of fiefdoms. We took that and we said, okay, look, let's build something where we can build essentially, let's address this by making the internet more decentralized. We'll build a decentralized application system. And we'll build this framework, and then developers can build on top of that, and then users can use the apps that they build on top of it, and boom, we can enable decentralized applications. This was this is while we were really excited about Bitcoin and the blockchain, but we were not thinking of this in terms of Bitcoin and the blockchain.
Well, I think that you hit on the same problem that George Gilder hit on in his Into the Fibersphere paper in the early 90s about how the telcos were going to become centralized points, or centralized hubs. And I think it's a similar issue as to like what Satoshi hit on with banks. And like at the end of the day, any networked system, whether it's the mail, the internet, money, whatever it is, the exact same problem has a tipping point at some point, and you get a similar reaction.
Yes, exactly. So then at some point we realized, wait a second, we can build this one way. We can build this on distributed hash tables. We can use, we can try to de-emphasize naming and utilize centralized naming systems, or we have this new amazing thing that is emerging, this amazing tool, and we can just build this on top of the blockchain. And we thought, okay, well, we can build this on top of Bitcoin. We looked at Namecoin, and we actually built our first decentralized identity application on top of Namecoin. What we did was we said, look, we're going to build this, we're going to decentralize the internet, we're going to build a decentralized application platform, but let's start with the first layer, let's start with identity. And we said, when we came out with OneName, which is the first identity system where you could actually own your identity on top of the blockchain, where you could actually own an identity in a way that you just have this private key, you have this, and this key is your identity, and the fact that you can actually rekey and have all these additional properties. But we built that on top of Namecoin, and it was, when we launched it, everyone was like, people were talking about decentralized applications on Bitcoin and the blockchain, and then we came out with it, and people were like, this is what we're talking about. I don't know if you guys remember that, but from the beginning, building out this decentralized identity layer was always, we always set out to build that as a component of a full-blown decentralized application system. And so the long answer to your question was that Manib and myself, we were both getting really into Bitcoin and the blockchain at the same time that we were really getting into this decentralized application idea, and they merged, and then we came out with this first first prototype, and then everything
First version.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, yeah, it's definitely awesome. I definitely suggest people to check it out because there's many different layers and how it all ties together. Let me ask Ansel, do you have a question for Ryan on this Blockstack?
Yeah, I was one of your first OneName people. I don't know, maybe in the first 500 people that signed up for OneName a couple years ago. But my question is in relation to decentralized apps. Do you see like competition from Ethereum? Where who is your competition out there, and is there anyone doing similar things to you?
Yeah, so I would say that Ethereum is competition, especially in terms of the direction, in terms of their vision, in terms of their focus. They are, I would say, a very different, they are taking a very different approach than we are, where our approach is build on top of the strongest and most secure blockchain at any given time. Our approach is minimize the number of transactions on the blockchain and use the blockchain for very few things. Use the blockchain for mapping public keys to hashes to globally unique names. And if we can use the blockchain for only the things that we need, absolutely need to use it for, then we can push almost everything else off of the chain. That's our philosophy for security, for scalability reasons. And another component of our approach is that we're focused on enabling, we're really focused on the interface, the common interface that developers will see, where we are looking to present developers with identity and storage components. And if we can take care of identity and storage, and developers can then use Bitcoin for payments, or whatever currency that they want to use. But
you compete with ICANN.
Sorry?
In my view, you compete directly with ICANN.
Yeah.
And the INA and the INAA or whatever.
Right.
Those are your most direct competitors.
The ICANN or right?
Mm-hmm. Yes. Exactly, yeah. So yeah, you're right. In a sense, we compete on multiple levels because what we are looking to provide is multiple components of this application stack that developers can plug into that allow the full application to be decentralized. So we looked at it and said, okay, well, if you're going to decentralize an application, your whole app needs to be decentralized, right? What are those critical layers that need to be decentralized so that the whole app is decentralized? So we said, okay, well, you need naming to be decentralized. You need public key discovery to be decentralized. You need identity and profiles to be decentralized. You need authentication to be decentralized. You need data storage and discovery to be decentralized. If we can provide all these components, then people can build truly decentralized apps. And if we can package them up in a really easy to digest way, then building decentralized apps can be not just as easy as building centralized apps, but even easier, because these developers don't have to worry about maintaining servers or databases. They don't have to worry about building.
And they don't have to worry about purchasing an additional coin like on Ethereum, right? And all the applications won't be running at the same time like Ethereum,
yes,
right?
Yes.
Yeah,
exactly. Yeah, I mean,
computational power.
Really, if you have a Blockstack node, right, and your Blockstack node is, I mean, we built Blockstack in a way that's agnostic of the underlying blockchain. So it operates as a virtual layer on top of the Bitcoin blockchain. But someone can write a driver for the Ethereum blockchain, Zcash blockchain, private blockchains, whatever. But the main network, we're committed to operating it on the strongest chain, and that's by far Bitcoin right now.
Sure.
Right?
So we'll go with Andrew then for the next question, and then Gabriel after that if Gabriel's got a question.
Sure. I was really into Namecoin as well early on. I thought it was really interesting because Satoshi himself kind of endorsed it. It's kind of always, my views of altcoins have always been based on Satoshi's support of Namecoin. Whenever you guys were moving from Namecoin to Bitcoin, I guess what would be some takeaways that you learned from that maybe someone else that's building something right now wouldn't think of whenever they're picking a base chain that then gets 51% attacked or something like that later on?
Okay, so I can walk you through our thought process. So we first had this idea. We were like, okay, well, we need a decentralized backbone for this identity system that we're building. We need a way for you to we need a way to discover essentially to map public keys to URLs, right?
So a pointer system.
Yes, exactly. We need this decentralized pointer system, and we said, okay, well, here's what we could do. We can use Bitcoin, and we can just take these raw transactions and just have some transactions embed URLs in an output or an op return, and then we have it, right? And we can just have a script to scan through all the transactions, and we're done. We thought of that, and then we were like, okay, well, we can do that, but there's also this other thing out there called Namecoin, and we saw that Satoshi endorsed it. We saw that at the time, Namecoin was actually pretty popular. It wasn't as popular as Litecoin or anything, but it was
top 4, like Feathercoin, Namecoin,
Yes,
Litecoin, Bitcoin.
Yes. At some point it was number 3, at some point it was number 4. And in terms of market cap and interest, and there was a good community around it. And so we said, okay, well, it's merge mined with Bitcoin, high hash rate, looks good. So we decided to try it out. And we were really interested. We said, okay, this is pretty amazing. We now also have this globally unique name component. And that's great. And so we built our prototype on top of that. There were some challenges, there were some setbacks. We loved Namecoin, but there were a few things where there's a lot to be desired.
Whenever Viacoin or whoever it was, 51% of it, you guys, I think either right before then or right after then, started the migration to Bitcoin.
Yes.
So I guess a better way to ask that is, if you could go back and start again, would you take the time to build out what people would say are more complex transaction or a protocol of more complex transactions over Bitcoin? Or would you start over an alt, knowing that you could migrate later? Would you bet the company on the migration today if you could do it again?
I see. Yeah, so real quick to back up, you mentioned the 51% attack or 51% issue. To be clear, there was a miner that had about like 60 to 70% of Namecoin control at one point. It never 51% attacked. It was in a sense a benevolent dictator of the Namecoin chain. So we were just like, okay, well, this is fine, like whatever. But no, as soon as it got close, we started the plan to migrate. So that was the final straw, really. But there were also reliability issues. The Namecoin software was not keeping up with core. I mean, it was just the old Bitcoin nodes suck, man. I mean, old Bitcoin nodes were so bad, and Namecoin was essentially operating old Bitcoin nodes because it hadn't merged in all the new changes for master. So that was a nightmare. And then the third problem the Namecoin had was that there was this weird system where they didn't there's no way for them to know about pricing like relative to like whatever outside currency. So what they did was they started the name cost really high, and they halved all prices every 2 months. So all names were insanely cheap, and basically all names got squatted into oblivion. So there's a huge squatting problem on Namecoin. So all three of them, and just like we didn't have much flexibility in terms of features. So we decided to switch. But I mean, I don't know what we would have done, but I think it was probably good that we started with Namecoin because it allowed us to build that prototype. And we actually, when we went out and built Blockstack. We still had the system operating on Namecoin, and then we built Blockstack in such a way that it operated on top of Bitcoin, the strongest chain. But that what we made the conscious decision, we said, look, we've had to migrate. We're going to have to migrate now. We're going to build Blockstack in such a way that it's not coupled to the underlying blockchain because we're not going to run into this situation again. So we built Blockstack in such a way that it has a migration system built in. So you can actually, the system.
So if a hard fork happens, you guys can, you really don't have to worry in the event of a hard fork. You can move your state between chains and get to the strongest chain at any given moment.
Yes. We wanted to decouple ourselves from any externality whatsoever, right? So if there's a Bitcoin fork, we're fine. If Bitcoin, God forbid, dies, we're fine. We just switch on to another chain. I mean, it would obviously suck, but you know, we can bring the whole community
Well,
together.
yeah, it's interesting because I mean, a couple of those chains had to join together, right? Like, so Litecoin had to join. Namecoin, I think, joined with Litecoin, right? There's a couple of different coins that had to join with Litecoin because of 51% attacks and because of development. They couldn't keep up with it and all sorts of different ideas. So it definitely makes sense that you wanted to, you know, be able to hop on a new chain if you need to, but use Bitcoin, you know, primarily as your primary kind of method of finding state, right? So that's really cool. So then let me, I have one more question. If Gabriel, do you have a question for Joel? Or Joel? I keep getting on my guest names. I know.
Ryan.
I keep getting my names. If you got a question for Ryan, I keep getting all my guest names wrong.
You know, I think we should maybe back up a little bit and just talk about exactly what Blockstack offers. And I'm looking at the intro page here, and it says, under the hood, Blockstack provides a decentralized domain name system, decentralized public key distribution system, and registry for apps and user identities. So that's a really cool suite of offerings. I wanted to just quickly ask you about what app registry is. I understand user identity registry, you know, for example, one name, which I was also an early adopter of, and I understand the other. But what is app registry? What's that?
So, in a sense, it's like a namespace on ICANN where you can register your app. So it's a namespace on Blockstack. So we have namespaces for different functions, right? So there's a .id namespace, and that's for identities for people. There's a .app namespace coming up, and that's a namespace for applications. There's a .iot namespace coming up, and that's for registering IoT devices. There are all these different namespaces that people are working on for specific functions. So whereas the traditional namespaces on ICANN were just for websites, having a namespace for other types of things is actually very useful. And I'll point out that it's not just about naming, it's also about enumerating all of the possible items that could be discovered, right? So you can have an app namespace, and then you can have crawlers that scan through it and then build up an index of all the applications that people could possibly download, right? Or websites that people can visit. And we're kind of getting into this world where single page applications and progressive web apps are, you know, there's like it's hard to distinguish between what a website is and what an application is. So I'm using the term to refer to both. But this single registry system, which provides for the mapping of globally unique names to public keys to hashes of zone files, which is the equivalent, it's the same format as the zone files in the domain name system, the ICANN-based domain name system. That mapping of those three columns allows for DNS, for public key infrastructure, for discovery, for being able to discover not just the public keys or addresses that own names, but also the keys that can be used for signing, for encryption, et cetera, et cetera.
So a lot of people know how you know, Bitcoin compares directly with a bank. You're doing like a wire transfer, but I don't think a lot of people realize that with Blockstack, whenever you register a namespace like a .iot or a .app, it's almost like a proof of burn into the blockchain, where you're initializing a new instance of the Blockstack protocol, and this is just from what I've looked into. With ICANN, you can do the same thing, and it's called, you pay them $100,000 and they'll lease the ability for you to manage your own namespace. And then you are basically giving a sublease to the user. So like whenever someone owns, say, bitcoin.com, they don't own bitcoin.com. They've signed a lease with VeriSign, who's signed a lease with ICANN, who's in an agreement with like the IANA to validate that all this stuff checks out. And there's like 13 root servers. There's no ownership there. But whenever you take Blockstack and you have a Bitcoin address, you, in the sense that, you know, someone else isn't going to be able to guess that address. And whenever you're able to, you know, tie the idea of a namespace, it's a functional idea of a namespace to that address, you're really creating ownership of that namespace. And I mean, that's why I think whenever you talk about competitors, your only competitor really is ICANN.
Yeah, there's nothing else
and
that
you are
there's nothing else that allows you to own your identity like that's, so to speak. And I think really a good way to think of it like is basically like, you know, you take Bitcoin, and with the power of Bitcoin, you can basically you can build on top of that to allow you to build protocols to be able to really create and own your a decentralized identity system. Like, you'll be able to actually own your own ID, so you can download your domain PKI, and you can download your your actual .id, so you can, no matter what, use your identity on the system, and nobody can own it, right? So that's kind
and
of
it's for multi-sig.
Yeah. Wow.
Like, you and me can share an identity, and we can both really own it. So it's really both of us at the same time. It's like an own state from Gödel Bach or something like that. It's weird, man.
It's really cool.
Yeah,
though.
I like it.
Yeah, that's really
You're
cool.
right.
So
That's a very good analogy, that there is actually any time that you have essentially like Bitcoin.com, there is this, you have a sublease, and it is, I think people don't really think about this because there's like a layer of obfuscation where people go to buy a domain from a domain name registrar and they think, okay, well, now it's mine. Well, no, it's not exactly yours.
yeah, real quick to interrupt you, Ryan. Yeah, I just got to say real quick. Yeah, sorry, I just got to interrupt you and say this because this is really important too. Like, this, people don't understand all of the because people are calling SegWit complex and things like that, right? They don't understand how crazy complex that it is just to get that little green signal, that little green lock on your domain, right? On your actual, when you go to a website, to say that right there is extremely complex, and it's a centralized entity. Like, there's only one or two people telling you that site is your site, that site is good, right? So sorry, continue.
Yeah, I mean, I'll also point out that multiple parties can each attest to that site. So you don't even have you don't even have a case where a particular certificate authority is entrusted with verifying who that site is. Any certificate authority can actually attest to that site. So if any root CA is compromised, then you can have entire portions of the internet that are just completely screwed.
It seems to be
exactly.
I was at a Forbes under 30 event, and I was talking to the COO of Forbes. I was going to show him Bitcoin Magazine like 2 years ago. But for like 5 minutes, 35% of the internet just decided to go down because of something that happened in some foreign country with some name register that just literally took out like a backbone or a huge chunk of it. No bugs on my site. I just get a white screen. And there was nothing I could do about it. And it was an opportunity to talk to another media company for me. And it just really made it really clear to me, there's no ownership of your sublease, and there's no certainty that what you see is, like, what I put out is what someone else is going to see. But with the Bitcoin blockchain, as long as Bitcoin is functioning, whatever is embedded in the blockchain is what everyone else sees. And that's an important distinction because it makes ICANN look like a joke. Just to be really honest, in comparison.
With that last that big DDoS attack, we saw that a huge number of websites were inaccessible. We saw this from Twitter to Netflix to like so many different websites. And I was able to fix that really quick because I just switched over to, I believe it was OpenDNS as my DNS provider. And I switched over real quick, and then all of a sudden all the sites were back up for me. And the reason for that is that they provide caching back for previous DNS lookups, and that actually addresses the problem, right? The problem is a lot of these DNS providers don't actually do that. They don't have a system where if you can actually cache it locally, or so that you can actually get the previous answer, right? But what we do with Blockstack is if you're running your own Blockstack node, you have cached locally every single DNS lookup that there is. And so now, even if you went offline, you could resolve names to public keys to zone files, and you could actually get to a point where you could use applications locally and completely resolve them.
Yeah, which is pretty powerful because that right there means you can use decentralized applications right there locally. So sorry, go ahead, Gabriel.
yeah, to me, this is a really interesting subject because it's such a wide issue in our society, and we're seeing these systems being disrupted for the first time in a really, how do you say, thorough-going way. And I'd like to just point out that such problems, which you might call fractional reserve ownership issues, are endemic in our society from the top levels all the way down to the micro levels. So we've got situations like where people assume, once again, like they assume that they own their domain name singly, assume that they own their stock shares, but actually, once again, they're being leased out from the actual owner, which is the DTCC, for example, in the United States. So we've got a situation where you've got many claimants on this supposed scarce resource of which is, you know, equities, and actually nobody really owns them, and they're actually held by central authorities who could conceivably decide to take the claim on them at any time. And when the bill comes due, you know, that's when the house of cards collapses, and that's how you get these huge bubbles and huge collapses one after the other, and depressions in many countries. You know, in the West, we're not quite as used to depressions, and people under 40 don't remember inflation and stagflation, but these kind of things happen in cycles, and it goes all the way up to the basic tenet of you know, the modern nation state with the ownership of land. People think, cool, I have a deed to my lot in out in the desert somewhere. Well, actually, no. The nation state really owns all the geographic land in your jurisdiction, and you just have a lease on it. So this is an endemic issue, and we're these digital cryptographic ownership schemes. We are heavily disrupting this fractional reserve, a scam that everybody's been operating under for decades, centuries, even millennia.
So I have, so that's very good points, Gabriel. And, you know, I have one question about that too. So Ryan, basically, you know, most of these things like maidsafe and all of these other decentralized internet attempts, these decentralized protocols seem to have a token with them, right? Like maidsafe has its own token. So what was your guys' thinking in not wanting to create any type of token to access your protocols?
I will answer that in a second, but I just want to point out something building off of the last conversation, which is that on Blockstack, there are namespaces, just like ICANN has many. ICANN has almost 2,000 namespaces. So on Blockstack, there's different groups that are creating their. Sometimes we'll help different companies come together and create like an .iot namespace, for example, like companies that want to collaborate on a new namespace. Anyone can create a namespace on Blockstack from their command line interface using Bitcoin. That's insane. Think about that. Like, you don't have to get permission from ICANN. You don't have to pay them $185,000. You don't have to bid on this enormous thing. You can actually go into your command line interface, deposit Bitcoin into it, register a namespace, and then set the rules for that namespace. You can say, I want the names to be priced like this. I want shorter names to be more expensive than longer names. I want names to expire after a year, or I want names to never expire. You can do all these things. You can customize your namespace for your needs, and it can apply to so many different things, not just people, not just websites, not just IoT devices, anything that you can dream up, you can make a namespace for that. So that's really what we're working to facilitate. We're working to make it even easier. You can do it today, but we're working to...
That's incredibly powerful.
It's the digitalization of the Louisiana Purchase right now. And like, if you really do look at like a history, there's an open land grab, and people are going to look back at somebody that buys up a ton of namespace, and it's going to be like the guy that bought Louisiana. And when it gets split off into different states, you're going to start to really see that things get really isomorphic, and it gets really weird. But it's a lot like that, in my opinion.
So I completely agree. Yeah, I mean, there's just like there was a land rush for domains in the original ICANN domain name system. There is, I mean, there's a rush for .id names on the .id namespace, and so I can imagine that happening with all the other namespaces, especially as we build out more software.
I have like 100 .id names right now, to be completely honest. I have like sudo, atom, type. I would be getting those .ids if I was a developer.
You can create something other than .id, right? It's not doesn't have to just be .ids, right?
You can pick any namespace.
Yeah, that's what I thought. Yeah, that's what I thought. So going back to my question about the tokens, then. So what was your thinking then in not creating a token, you know, similar to the way that maidsafe or other companies went down?
We're kind of just watching the space in terms of what people are doing with tokens. We're taking a wait and see approach with that. And I think there's a lot of exciting things going on there. I think there's some caveats. You definitely have to be careful. There's some strange things going on, but there's also some promising things. And so I like to watch projects like Zcash. I like to watch some of the tokens that are being created on top of Ethereum. I like to watch some of the ones that are on top of Bitcoin and see what people are getting at, what these projects are getting out of it, and how it's helping them, whether it's for incentives to get involved in the system, whether it's a voting mechanism for participants in the network, whatever it is, right? So we don't have a position on this. We just I think just like a lot of the other things in the space, I like to see lots of experiments, and I like to look at what's working out and try to approach it with as open a mind as possible, because I think really no one knows what's going to work out in the end of the day.
So it sounds like you wanted to approach it from the scientific point of view, right? Like that's you saw a problem and you sought to fix it, and you sought to fix it not through financial gain, right?
Yes,
like that's kind of
just like how we approached building our prototype and saying, well, we could use Bitcoin, we could use Namecoin. At the end of the day, we had a hypothesis. Our hypothesis was Namecoin, and we went with Namecoin. Then we kept iterating. We addressed, okay, now we have this new roadblock with Namecoin. What's our new hypothesis? Maybe we need to build one on top of Bitcoin. So we've really been, I like to think that we're extremely pragmatic with how we approach things. We try to figure out what is the best way that we can achieve our goals and our vision and help as many people as possible, and not try to assume that we know what the right answer is.
Yeah, so it's going to be interesting to see. I mean, because obviously, you know, decentralized identity and decentralized ownership is going to be the huge land grab, the huge, you know, digital space, digital asset. This whole space is just going to be absolutely huge in the next, you know, 3 to 5 years. It's going to really explode. So it's going to be interesting to see where the markets go and what they decide. Like if most people decide they want to build stuff on Ethereum, or if most people want to decide they want to build stuff on maidsafe or Blockstack, all these decentralized options exist, and it's great that you know, that they all exist, that they're all trying to do something different so that they can actually compete. So it is going to be interesting to see how all of these play out. So it's very, very cool stuff. So
yeah, the people who are looking to build on top of any of these systems, I mean, my advice would be, don't get caught up in tribalism. Look at what your constraints are, what your needs are, what you're looking to get out, like what you want out of the decentralized application that you're going to build, and just look at all the systems. Look at Ethereum, look at maidsafe, look at Blockstack, look at what these systems provide, and look at your requirements, look at the things that they provide, and see how you could actually go about and build your system on top of all of them, and look at what your security properties would be, look at what your scalability properties would be, look at the interface, you know, how long it would take you to build this. And we are making the case that, you know, we're trying to build something that's the best possible experience for developers and is the most secure and most scalable. But, you know, at the end of the day, developers got to make their own judgment calls and look into the software themselves.
Yep. Very true. Very true. I mean, look at, like you said, look at what's good. Look at what you actually need out of the application. I mean, don't get bogged down too much by all the hype, right? Just kind of play with some stuff and figure out what's going to be good for you. And you know, if you want to speculate and stuff, there's definitely plenty of coins to do that with. But if you really want to build something for science, then you know you want to do it the right way. And so really take a look at some research into Blockstack and its competitors, and you'll find some pretty interesting differences. So very cool stuff. Does anybody have any other questions for Ryan before we move on to the news? Andrew or anybody? Or No. Okay. Very cool. So very. Andrew, did you have something? Nope. Okay, cool. So very, very cool. This was a very interesting conversation about Blockstack. Of course, it was just a little intro beginner, but I just wanted to talk about it a little bit to get this in people's minds about how centralized our name domain system is, and really how centralized everything is. Right? You start somewhere, and then you keep going up, and you keep realizing that it's freaking all centralized, because that's just kind of the only way we knew how to do stuff throughout history. Right? This is now we're approaching a new era. With the blockchain era and the Bitcoin era, that allows us to really take back sovereignty on all sorts of different things, mainly, of course, identity. So it's going to be really cool to watch that play out. So we got about 50 people watching right now. If everybody could go out, tweet out the show, Facebook out the show, let everybody know we're here talking Bitcoin. Go ahead and like the show or dislike the show. Leave us comments. We definitely read all the comments. We definitely love the conversation that our viewers bring. So, and of course, if you're here live, if you can make it to the show live, join us in the chat. We got a conversation in there going. Everybody's having a good time. So thanks so much for everybody for joining us. And I think we're going to move on to our first topic of the day, which is going to be about the Winklevoss, right? God, I love saying that. I'm sure everybody loves saying that, right, from the movie. Much better than saying the Winklevoss twins. No. The freaking Winklevoss. Their Bitcoin ETF is set to possibly be approved by March 11th. And I want to know from the panelists, like, do we think this will happen? And is this going to be good or bad for Bitcoin? And what do we think is going on? So first, we always go with the special guest first, and then we randomize everybody after that. So first, we'll ask Ryan, what do you think about this ETF? What do you think?
I honestly have no idea if it's going to go through or not. I haven't looked too much into it, so I will just caveat with that. So I think it looks like there's 2 or 3 ETFs in the pipeline. Someone can correct me if I'm wrong, but I mean, in my view, it's best if as many as possible succeed so that there's competition.
Yep, very interesting. Yeah, there's definitely a couple that's been trying to launch, right? More than one, but Bitcoin, but the Winklevoss seems to be the biggest one. I think it's called Coin ETF or something like that. So there's this trying to be the biggest, because I guess they were the first, right? They were the first to attempt to try to actually create an ETF. So they've been trying to do it for the longest. So I think it's coming up. They started in 2013. So we're coming up on more than 3 years that they've been trying to get this passed. And so the SEC and everybody just keeps pushing them back, and it eventually just faded away into the media. But now it's back because of the price of Bitcoin is now over 1,000 again, and so everybody's kind of coming back to Bitcoin and seeing what's going on. And now with the prospect of an ETF actually launching while Bitcoin is over 1,000, there's been articles released about that there could be some kind of mania, right? That could just drive it way up into the sky, multiple thousands. So going to be interesting to see if that happens. We'll go with Gabriel next. What do you think about the ETF, man? Do you think it'll get launched, or is it good for Bitcoin, or what do you think?
Not many people talk about one of my main concerns with the proliferation of crypto ETFs, and that is this is actually the same thing I just talked about, the danger of fractional reserve paradigms when it comes to crypto assets. This is an ETF is essentially a centralization and a way to create a trusted third party or untrustworthy third party. Essentially, traders want to push off the security onto the Winklevoss, and that's a very dangerous thing. I mean, the Winklevoss are already a honeypot, but if you also add in a bunch of investors to pump up the price based on this new accessibility, you create an even bigger honeypot. And so the Winklevoss, while the value of their holdings are somewhere around $100 million worth of Bitcoin right now, should the ETF take off and a lot of people flee to metal and crypto ETFs in order to secure their wealth, quote unquote, it's a bunch of Bitcoin than it is to attack physical. It's not Ocean's 11 here to steal a bunch of Bitcoin. It's a lot easier, I think. I mean, so far there's been a lot of hacks. this is just going to create such an incredible incentive to attack these ETFs. And it's also an incentive to
just throw away the key.
Say again, Ryan?
I said easiest way to prevent your Bitcoins from getting stolen is generate it offline and just throw away the key.
Right. So Bitcoin can be destroyed. Bitcoin can be stolen. You know, this is, and human beings and our society, our culture, we're used to securing physical things. It's a concept that's familiar to us. We understand, okay, there's a place that it's going to live. We want to hide the place. We want to secure the place. There's safes. There's this, there's that. Crypto, you know, cybersecurity is a very new field, and the systems that exist so far have been, you know, corrupted quite often. There's hacks. The state of crypto security is essentially an ongoing emergency, and ETFs. So there's the fractional reserve side. So I mean, who's to stop, you know, the Winklevoss? Let's say 2/3 of their holdings get stolen. Who's to stop them from not? There's only 3 people who have access to it, or whatever. You know, they've got their, or maybe they've got a 3 to 5 multi-sig or something. These 5 people know, and they're under obligation not to say anything. And then eventually it comes out that, oh, all of your, you know, ETF shares are actually only worth 1/3 of what you thought they are. This is going to cause untold volatility, I feel like, with the Bitcoin price. You're introducing this massive security hole, essentially, an opportunity to scam or get screwed. So I think this is actually a huge security blot on Bitcoin. It's going to volatility, more weak craziness. So I think it's going to an easy ingress for capital as well as an easy egress for capital, and both at the same time very volatile.
Yeah, it definitely seems like that, you know, by creating this ETF, they apparently think that they can do security than any other previous exchange that's ever been in existence on Bitcoin, right? Because all major Bitcoin exchanges pretty much at this point have gotten hacked at least once, you know?
Yeah.
They're coming along and saying, nope, we can do it way better than that. And by the way, we're going to have way more liquidity and way more money in it, you know? So it's a bit of a scary thing for me, because if that did get hacked, holy crap, would that drag down the price of Bitcoin a bit?
Right, it's just going to be, it's going to encourage so much volatility, and I think that the authorities are very much on the fence, and that's why I think we're really at a 50-50 point with that. I really not sure whether their greed will outweigh their the genuine security concerns.
Putting on my Blockstack hat, I would love to see someone build a decentralized exchange that could somehow, you know.
For sure. And, you know, we've talked about them on the show before, decentralized exchanges and things like that. And we definitely are a believer. Yeah, BitSquare, you know, is one. We definitely are a believer in them. I think that it's only a matter of time before the pendulum switches over to them. But we're going to need more incentive, which means we're going to need more hacks. We're going to need more crackdown on Bitcoin and things like that for that to happen. So I definitely see that as a possibility. But, you know, it could go either way, really. So we'll have to see. But we'll go with Ansel next, and then Andrew. So Ansel. Sorry, what did you say, Ryan?
There's also Ether Delta on Ethereum.
Oh, yeah, Ether Delta is another decentralized exchange for sure. And yeah, it's going to be interesting to see, you know, the tipping point where you go from all the liquidities in centralized exchanges to most of it going to decentralized. But that's what I'm a little looking forward to very much. And of course, we have the problem of the last mile with fiat, right? That's always going to be an issue until nobody's using fiat anymore, right? So we'll see. That's obviously 10, 20 years down the road. So that's going to be a while. But it seems inevitable to me. But Ansel, what do you think about this? Still on mute, buddy. Still on mute.
There we go. I don't think the fractional reserve issue will be that big a deal, because there's going to be a lot of competitors, not just inside the United States, but in the UK and Japan. There's going to be a lot of investment vehicles like this. It's just a matter of who goes first. And I think so, as the US regulators are looking at this, they have a choice, you know. Do we go first, or do we let other people go first and maybe get a huge share of this market? have Bitcoin flood into their economy. So I think I'm more bullish. I think it's very likely that it will get approved for that reason. Yeah, because
somebody's got to be first to the door, right? Somebody's got to be first to the door.
Yeah, and they want to control Bitcoin, and I think they don't understand it first off, but they want to control it. So that's a dangerous combination when you let regulators do that, and that just gives them another incentive to approve this because I think it will give them a lot of control. Yes, I think volatility will come, but I'm ready for it.
Awesome. Yeah, I think Honey Badger doesn't care, right? So we'll see what happens. Andrew, what do you think about this Bitcoin ETF, man?
Oh, I think it's going to go through, and I think it's going to be crazy. So I get what Gabriel's saying, but at the same time, this is the Wild West. And if somebody wants to do this with Bitcoin, they can totally do it with Bitcoin. I mean, Coinbase right now has 1 million Bitcoin by the last count that me and Turdemeester did together. And then Satoshi himself has close to 1 million. Satoshi's coins haven't been moved. Someone might have them. He might have them. T-Bach might have them for all I know. Like, I don't know. I don't really care. Things haven't been moved. And I mean, I've done everything I could do to hack them from a white hat perspective, and they're still there. And Gemini's competing with them. But I really think that it's going to go through because, and I don't mean to get political here, but like whenever I was looking at the presidential campaign on the Clinton side, had all this blockchain stuff coming out. Coming from the Trump side, but if you look at some of his advisors, they're not foolish about Bitcoin. They're not dumb when it comes to the existence of Bitcoin, what it is, why it's useful. And the other day I tweeted something called the geopolitical prisoner's dilemma. And while it would be crazy to allow something like this to be approved, I would not be surprised at all if it was. And then the moment it is approved, I think the type of people that are going to get involved in it, a lot of mind share, and they're going to really start thinking about the money that they're putting into this ETF. So at first they might flood money in just because the price will go up and it will be the hot, exciting thing to do. And then hackers are going to definitely go after it, and they're either going to hack it or they're not. But that doesn't mean that the persistent, like inside job type hacks are not going to stop. Like Gabe has a very, very good point there. There will be moves towards that. It'll be what pushes and what drives us towards Overstock's T0 or side chains as a mechanism for handling a lot of these problems. And I think that, I mean, some people are going to have to get shot. It's the Wild West. Some people are going to trip. Some people are going to fall. Some people are going to get rich. There's 1,000 ways to die in the West. And that's exactly what Bitcoin is. Anything moving towards global adoption of Bitcoin and like a global understanding of like how different entities can use it to interact with each other, I think is a really good thing for Bitcoin. And I wouldn't discount, I don't think regulation is going to be as big of an issue going forward. Just in my own personal opinion, just from all the signals that I'm feeling as of late, I think it's going to be pretty crazy. And
so you think they're going to open up the gates? You think they're just going to open up the gates, pretty much?
Oh yeah, I think it's. I mean, I think that approving Bitcoin like ETF wise is the same as approving like nuclear power in a sense. And I think that it's something that's just crazy enough to now happen. And I definitely don't think it would have happened before. So they're going to have to negotiate on how they do it, but I think that it will get done. And I think that people will put money in there. I mean, it's a good thing because I mean, I myself have been the victim of extremely targeted hacks. Now, how am I supposed to go talk to some banker and tell him to get on, the Bitcoin game and to manage his own personal security when if his own investment into Bitcoin makes him a target and makes him vulnerable? If the Winklevoss can actually eyes on the way Coinbase is handling what they do for their customers, then good for them. That's their entry point. Now people are going to get paranoid about it eventually, and they're going to move towards having their own keys, which is why
Blockstack and identity, I think will be the long tail, really big topics moving forward. But getting guys from Goldman Sachs and getting guys from Wall Street to really get into the headspace of someone that has a full understanding of the OSI stack and like DNS and all that, and to keys to really see these as bearer bonds, they're going to have to go through a route like the ETF. And I think the ETF will happen. I think it will bring people in. I think hackers will go after it. And the only risk towards Bitcoin is the same risk that we already have, and that's confusion. If something were to happen and people were to ag on the ignorant and create a state of what I call confusionism, that would be really bad, because the ETF's bylaws and like what the definition of a fork would be and what their incentives would be in the event of a Ethereum-like economic hard fork, there are risks there. But I don't think that the people involved in this ETF are stupid. We're just gonna have to wait and see. But I mean, it's really out of our control in terms of whether or not it's going to happen. All we can do is continue to build on Bitcoin, take advantage of this state of affairs once it either does or doesn't happen.
Because we know it will happen at some point. If it doesn't happen in March, I mean, it's going to happen at some point. But I think Ansel had something.
Oh yeah, I was just gonna say, yeah, someone's got to be first. And I think, like, you see Japan getting really friendly regulations. Nobody wants to be left behind. The best move right now is to approve it, I think. Yeah, that's all I had.
Yeah, to stay ahead of the game. I mean, really, they've got to do it if they want to be in this new world, right? So they have to dip their toe in. So it very well could be approved. Somebody in the chat said that I don't know if this is true, but March 11th is also the day that the Federal Reserve it was enacted, so that would be hella ironic. I think that would be pretty great to see if the Bitcoin ETF gets approved the same day that the Federal Reserve did. And then also one last point. I guess you can now bet on the outcome, right? At BitMex. So I haven't. Last time I checked, it was like 30% chance that the ETF would be approved. But you can definitely check that at BitMex. If you got some extra coin to spend, you can speculate on that. So that is a bit of a telling signal, but it is going to be a pretty small signal overall, in my opinion. But that's about 30% so right now. Does anybody else have any other comments on the ETF before we move on? No? Okay, cool. So very cool. So thanks guys so much for joining us again. That was the Bitcoin ETF topic. We got about 48, 50 people in the chat right now, or watching us right now. We got people in the chat hanging out. So if you guys want to share out the show, Facebook out the show, tweet out the show, let everybody here know that we're talking Bitcoin, and definitely, give us a thumbs up if you like us, because that does help us appear in people's thread, appear in people's streams and things like that. So that helps us get more spread out on the YouTubes out there. So definitely like it if you thumbs up if you like it, thumbs down if you don't like it. Give us some comments. We love to hear the conversation back from you guys, because we do only do the show once every other week. So during the interim, we definitely like to communicate via the comments and stuff like that. And of course, we're all on Twitter. We'll be giving out everybody's Twitter handles at the end of the show, and they'll also be in the show notes. So let's moving on to the next topic here. I wanted to talk about the DCG, basically the digital currency group, because basically they just released an article called Scaling Bitcoin, and it was kind of met with some backlash almost immediately from some of the prominent Bitcoin community members. They were writing various scathing responses in the form of Medium articles as well, to reply to them. And so what I kind of want to ask the panelists is, like, what do you think makes the digital currency group so disconnected kind of from what Bitcoin is and what it's meant to be used for? It seems that they really have this eye out for Bitcoin for enterprise, and they kind of want to make that a reality somehow. And I'm just trying to figure out why that is, and to kind of reflect what they wrote, because in what they wrote to me is very telling about what they think Bitcoin is. So let me ask Ryan first, if you had a chance maybe to read this article, what do you think about in general, like of this article, and then about the digital currency group's role in cryptocurrency in the Bitcoin world overall?
Oh, sure, yeah. So I'll point out that we're part of their portfolio. So we're one of the DCG companies. I think a very large percentage of Bitcoin companies are in their portfolio. Now, I would point out one thing, which is that article was a compilation of responses from members of their portfolio. So I saw some of the response articles that were trying to respond to that, and basically say as if the writing was coming from the perspective of DCG, but it wasn't. It was just they were trying to facilitate a discussion and to figure out a way to take a lot of the perspectives from existing companies who might not have engaged as much in a debate or engaged with the core developers, which I think, frankly, is a shame. And so trying to compile some thoughts from people was very useful. I'd also say that if you look at if you kind of look at the responses, some of the people who there's a bias, right? A selection bias in that this is my theory, right? That the responses that you'll get to any particular question that are most interesting are going to be the ones where someone maybe it's a little more controversial, or maybe it's something that's a little more, someone has more questions or hasn't looked into something as much. That's what I kind of got from that. Whereas a lot of the companies who were completely on top of some of those questions probably didn't talk on those points. And at the end, the article ended with Zuku's perspective, which he was basically saying that you have all these options, understand what your options are, and take one of them, and that's it, right? That's kind of how I interpreted his perspective, and from Zuku's perspective and from Zcash's perspective, they're like, okay, well, we're going to build our own chain. We want confidential transactions. We're going to build a chain that allows us to do that. So I think what Andrew was saying before, how this is kind of a Wild West, that's kind of a good point. Look, you have control over certain things, right? You have control over what you can do, what your business is. One of the perspectives that we take on in our project, in our community, in our company is we want to remove external dependencies as much as possible. And for things where you have to be at least partially or in the short term dependent on, have a plan to switch and have a best alternative option, right? Have a botnet like Zuku said, and influence things where you can, and work on the best possible software that you can, and keep moving things forward and contribute and give back to the community. And I think that's all you can do. I think that DCG was very commendable for putting together for compiling that list and talking to these companies. And I just think that we need more communication and more understanding and more introspection into what this article was largely around segregated witness. I would point out that at least in my view, from what it looks like to me, DCG and a lot of the companies are very much supportive of SegWit, and the more that people look into it, the more that people understand exactly what segregated witness is, the more people support it. That's my experience.
Yep, very interesting, very interesting. We'll go. Let's see. We'll go with Andrew next on this. What did you think about this article, Andrew?
So I mean, a lot of people reacted pretty harshly to it, and I just don't expect executives of Bitcoin companies in general to know what developers of the core Bitcoin protocol mean whenever they say something. I don't think that there's really a shared vocabulary there, and I think the attempts with the different conferences on scaling Bitcoin to establish it have proven that it really isn't there. I mean, it's two sides of the same coin. Bitcoin is a technical concept and it's a financial concept, depending on who you're talking to. And I think the DCG portfolio, DCG is obviously very silver. Barry started with, he has the Genesis trading. He has that GBTC or whatever. He's been doing this for a while from the financial side. And when it comes to the financial aspects of Bitcoin, I think that he was one of the earliest and smartest guys to be aware of it. But when it comes to the technical aspects, I've never gone to them specifically, or the DCG Medium page to really, you know, get an idea of like what's best for the system. When it comes to financial stuff, sure, but technical stuff, not really. So with like segregated witness, I think a lot of people misunderstand it. I think to a lot of people, it's a really obvious upgrade. And I think I'm just not surprised by a lot of people asking a bunch of questions that seem, you know, quite obvious, like why can't we just ask miners to do this or something like that. I don't necessarily think this is a bad thing. They're building atop Bitcoin, and they're doing services for people, these various DCG companies that reacted in a way that people didn't really care about. They're building out the services that, you know, somebody at, say, Blockstream that's maybe doing some Bitcoin core work and really focused on like Lightning Network, sidechain, segregated witness type stuff, the same customer base. There's going to be a demand in the long term from everybody for Bitcoin, depending on what the walk of life they come from. And I think, you know, chopping off heads just because a couple executives don't understand segregated witness would be like going up to a developer that's pale white, that's been sitting in a dark room for a long time, and being mad at him for not understanding every intricate detail of the Winklevoss ETF. You know, not everyone in Bitcoin is a Renaissance man, and a lot of people have a lot of good intentions when they do these articles. I would be pissed off if DCG had pumped this article through CoinDesk, but they didn't. They did it through a Medium blog post, and they're allowed to be wrong about it, and they're not showing any malice. They're not taking 8 different articles, pumping it through there as op-eds through a controlled media outlet that they have. And I think, you know, everyone can talk all they want, but go to the Satoshi Nakamoto Institute's article on who controls Bitcoin. And when it comes down to it, whenever I get tired of something or someone else gets tired of something and we're depending on a feature that no one's implementing, we're going to do a minority fork, and it's going to be a decentralized pull request of sorts if no one else, if we can't get consensus. And until someone hits that threshold, none of this really bothers me, because there's not such a demand for a feature that somebody's willing to crash the price of Bitcoin for a second to have an outcome that in the long run returns a lot of value to the main chain. I'm not particularly worried. I think people overreact to things all the time. And I think people look at two companies and they think they're the exact same thing, but they don't realize the sides of the coin metaphor, 2 sides of the same coin. So I'm not that worried about it. DCG is supporting Bitcoin by building over it and acknowledging it exists. And that is a lot more than Salesforce is doing right now, or a bunch of other companies that are completely aware of what Bitcoin is and just I mean, Julian Assange told Eric Schmidt what Bitcoin was like a year into Bitcoin being a thing. And where's the Google integration of Bitcoin? Like, there isn't one other than, you know, the price ticker. So I'm not mad about it. I'm not worried about it. I'm not trying to embarrass anybody. Had they gone through CoinDesk, I'd have been a little pissed off, because I mean, people that have followed my Twitter account know I will call someone out if I think they're doing something a little sketchy, and I don't see anything wrong with DCG executives having an opinion about something and having it from the perspective of what their job is. And as a CEO of a company, their job is to keep money in their bank account and make sure that when their 18-month run of their last raise is up, they're able to put money back into that bank account so their employees are able to continue to work. Now, if we as an industry allow buzzwords to become the topic of conversation, that will guide the topics of that will guide the reactions and the thought leadership attempts by the executive teams of various companies as they go through their rounds and various other, you know, events that are very specific to startups. And, you know, it's just, if you're not really deeply involved in startups, it could be confusing. And if you haven't been involved in Bitcoin long enough to, you know, be attacked at a tech conference by financial people, or to be attacked at a finance conference by tech people, maybe you wouldn't understand. But I would still do business with any of these DCG people. So I'm not really.
Well, that's definitely some good points, you know, because if they would have went through CoinDesk, that would have really That would really upset me. That's true. Like, I tend to overreact a lot. As people maybe follow my Twitter account can see, like, I don't really have much of a filter. Probably should work on that, but that's probably also why I'm anonymous. but seriously though, I'm glad that we can bring some understanding to this article as well, from their perspective, too, because I definitely have a few different things to say about this article too once the guests get through. So I think we're going to go with Gabriel next because he has to go soon. So Gabriel, please give us your thoughts on this article.
Yeah, so I'll start by agreeing with Andrew that this article is inconsequential for Bitcoin. I don't believe that it affects anything of any real importance in what's actually going on. I think it's an example of, it seems to me definitely to be an example of unintentional FUD. So they're creating fear, uncertainty, and doubt, expressing their uncertainty, their genuine uncertainty, as Andrew pointed out. Their executives understand the technical stuff, and that's fine. I really enjoyed Beautyon's article, the letter that was put out. Basically, Beautyon did one of his famous analysis rants where he just kind of grabbed pretty much every key paragraph from the letter from DCG and Meltem de Miroir, or however you pronounce it, and really called them out on a lot of total bullshit. I think they're very much guilty of a very stupid approach. In this case, I think Meltem is really completely off base. Once again, I don't think it matters because it's essential to the real movers and shakers in Bitcoin. But really, the main I took from that I agree with, and that I had the same thought when I read the letter. The main takeaway from Beautyon's analysis is, you didn't do due diligence. It's your responsibility to hire the nerds that understand this stuff, and then you act from that point. To go out publicly and just basically admit, hi, we haven't done our due diligence, or hired the Andrew DeSantis's and Ryan Shea's of the world to interpret these technical matters into a language that we can understand. That's not anybody else's fault, guys. And I think and Beautyon made a lot of really great points in that article. And the interesting thing is, DCG, as Ryan pointed out, is really shotgunning their investment money, and they're hitting a lot of, and what I in my opinion, like Blockstack, they're hitting a lot of great projects. So I don't think it's an issue on the investment side. And I would say that that they don't have somebody on staff that can explain SegWit to them, and yet they seem to be doing so well in the investment space. And I think once again that maybe they're just trying to cover all their bases, because it's so, in general, VC is so damn hard to predict that they're just spreading around their capital wherever, which is fine, great. I don't think this is necessarily a reflection on the viability of DCG as a company at all. But it's surprisingly stupid that they don't have individuals on their staff, CTO, CIO, head of technology strategy, that can inform them on this topic. And they're out publicly, hi, we don't have any, we're a technology investment company that does not have anybody on staff who knows anything. It's certainly not Barry Silbert. Barry Silbert's just another Wall Street douche. He's fine, he's whatever, he's a money guy, that's his thing. But hire the people that know about the industry that you're investing in, fellas and ladies. Do your due diligence. That's not anybody's fault but your own. And to just kind of lash out at like issues that would be a problem in centralized industries like government or corporations, for being problems in a decentralized platform that doesn't actually have a, quote, community, doesn't actually have a board, it doesn't have responsible for, Bitcoin Core is not an entity, and so basically they're saying these. That's another thing from Beauty On's analysis that's absolutely dead on, bullseye. They're applying principles and values from centralized institutions like governments and corporations to a decentralized platform protocol, and it's just completely ridiculous. So I think that this letter is totally meaningless and off base, and it really shows a lack of due diligence on their part. So I think that their investors should pretty much raise a ruckus and just say, hey, idiots, you're endangering my investment by not individuals that are knowledgeable in the space and can inform us as to the viability. Up front, admitting that they don't have the proper staff to vet technologies, and then expressing an opinion about that, really, really stupid. And they should shut up, but I also really don't care because nothing they say is important. And with that, I'm going to have to leave you guys. I'm really sorry. Anybody publicly, feel free to tweet me at Gabriel D. Vine on Twitter about any opinions I just expressed in this article, or in my rant, and in this show in general. I want to thank Vortex for having me. It's been great. I want to thank Ryan. I really love everything you had to say, and I can't wait to converse with you online and learn more about Block.
Thanks, Gabriel.
Awesome, Gabriel, man. Yeah, thanks so much for joining us, man. We really appreciate the time that you give us. So, Gabriel has to go.
Thank you.
Yep. Thanks so much, Gabriel, man, and have a good one. And enjoy your rest of the weekend.
Thanks for and special shout out to Andrew and Ansel. See you guys. Bye.
Thanks. See you, Gabriel.
Awesome. So yeah, so he had some. So Gabriel had a bunch of good points in there for sure. You know, like the unintentional FUD. Like that's the bit of where I saw a bit of the danger is the unintentionalness. It's like, yeah, look, you have some questions and stuff like that, and that's great, but there are people that can answer that for you. Like seriously, you need to start hiring Ryan Shea. You need to start hiring Andrew DeSantis. You need to get these people's opinions, because these are the people that know all of the questions to the answers that you post in that article. These are the people that can definitely help you and figure this stuff out, because as it stands right now, this article looks like it came from a typical like investor company who doesn't have a clue about what's going on with the space, but yet they invest in great companies like Blockstack. So like you said, there seems to be a bit of a disconnect between their investment end and then the high level end of people.
One thing about the investment end is a damn good investor is right only 1 out of 10 times, and when they're right, they're right. And DCG has ridden the Bitcoin roller coaster enough times that Bitcoin wise, they were right. Now the version numbers incremented a couple times since then, and maybe they don't know much about the differences between the version increments, but the fact that they hit a 1 in 10 10x, by my count, it should have been possible for them 2 to 3 times now. That means they're probably one of the better investment groups out there as far as investors go. I dealt with investors in 2013 where I was just like, guys, we need to really get on this Bitcoin thing. And they went, no, we're really into gold mining. Yeah, they're loving that decision now, like compared to what they could have had in terms of returns. So I mean, DCG is actually really good at getting the returns on that, and that we were talking about earlier, it doesn't exist, but GBTC does exist, and like the XBT one that KNC used to do, it did exist over in Sweden through the NASDAQ or whatever. There have been outlets and some creativity on the side of these financial people, but they only have to be right 1 in 10, and if I was them, I would put out another article that makes them look just as bad as this last one did, just to troll us.
Oh man.
Well,
that's what it kind of does. Like it kind of made them look bad. Like it kind of made them look like they're just sitting on the fence, like waiting for somebody else to make the smart decision. It's like they didn't put any new information about any new perspective, any perspective that could be taken into the overall discussion. They just kind of repeated the questions that everybody's asking. So that's kind of what
another perspective on this, which is what if you thought of it like, okay, so like if you look at the article, right? So Meltem from DCG compiled it, right? And so I know Melton. She's a friend of mine. She's an investor in us, so we know her pretty well. She wrote like only the first 3 paragraphs or something like that. And if you think about that, it was just a like, hey, we sent out a survey, we compiled some conversations, and we presented this information. If you think about like what that said, there's nothing controversial there. There's no
Right. There was zero controversy.
Yeah. It was, if you think of it like, here is a poll, this is a information gathering post, right? All this is set out to do is to gather some information from these companies and then relay it so that people can get a pulse of what a lot of these Bitcoin companies are thinking. Now, to the person who compiled that post, and in this case that was Melton, that I think is very commendable, right? That is not, like, okay, so you can decide to do it or decide not to do it, right? And I think what she was trying to do was not inject her perspective at all into it and just say like, this is a service we tried to provide. Here's a way that we can give people a voice and a way to get up some things that some of their perspectives, and just compiling it, and that's it. I actually think that's like a good way to do it. And look, these statements stand on their own. They are statements from other people. I didn't make those statements, and I know a little bit about her perspective just outside of this, and I know that she talks with core developers, and there's a few of them that you can ask, and just to know that like she actually does engage with them. Absolutely, she does. So I just kind of wanted to push back on Gabriel's criticism of that, because it's easy to throw criticism. It's easy to jump at people and say, look, you don't know what you're talking about. You haven't invested the time and whatever. But I think if you had some conversations with people who work there, you'd see that they would surprise you in terms of the things that they know. And also I want to build off of what Andrew DeSantis said, which is like, not everyone knows everything about everything else, right? And so people, like, no one knows everything. No one should be expected to be an expert in every single
except for you and me.
Right. No.
Except for Andrew.
Yeah.
You have to be a Renaissance man like Andrew.
Yeah. Right. So yeah, I mean, people can try to learn about as many things as they want. That's great. I love that. I mean, I'm totally for that, and I'm a big believer in that myself. But I also think that I think this was a good effort, and it was interesting for me to see what people are thinking. And it's also, I think, important to think that there are perspectives all over the map. There's some people who are like some companies that have really go into the details of the updates with Bitcoin, updates to Bitcoin Core. They really understand everything underlying it. Some companies actually don't need to and shouldn't, right? Like, there are some Bitcoin companies that honestly, it's not that top of mind, right, for them, because they're focusing on other things. Some of these companies also, they're not even building on top of Bitcoin. There's Zcash. There's look, they have on the other end of side of things, there's also block streams in their portfolio, right? So there's companies all over the map. I would just say that if there's some like communication breakdown happening here with regards to SegWit, where I think there's certain things that people don't really understand about it. There's also another perspective, which is people are frustrated that things haven't happened in terms of changes to Bitcoin over the past couple of years, and for better or for worse, right? But there's this kind of breakdown. I actually think, one way, so I don't know if you guys read, there's a blog post that I wrote that was on the top of r/Bitcoin, I think it was maybe a year ago. It was the scaling announcement that Bitcoin Core should have made. And
I remember that one. Yeah.
I put that out, and I saw this as, this was a problem mainly with communication, with people respecting one another, with understanding that sometimes they're not on the same page all the time, and that we need to facilitate that. And two of my big perspectives, like I think that kind of come together on this is, one, Bitcoin companies need to support core more, right? I think both in terms of in terms of code, right? If you are a large company that's highly dependent on Bitcoin, you should have someone who's full-time, right? Working on core, right? Two, if you can contribute, if there's a way to contribute financially to, I think there needs to be some way for core itself or some individuals in core to be able to fund efforts that are not related to code itself. And so if, I don't know, maybe that's a third party, an independent organization or something, whatever, where people...
Well, Alex Morkos has done a great job at it.
He
set an example. Like Alex Morkos has done a pretty good job of just like leading the way.
Yeah. So I think, yeah, I mean, Alex Morkos, he's great. We need more of that where, okay, so two things. Bitcoin companies need to contribute to core more. And on the other side of things, it would be interesting to me to take these indicators or these thoughts that that founders and CEOs and CTOs in the Bitcoin space, these things that people have said about SegWit and the scaling problem and et cetera, and use them to inform how, like, what people do know and what they don't know, and what are the misunderstandings they have, and how we can actually close the communication gap. And for the people who do know all of these things, for them to be able to reach out to the companies that want to learn more or want to figure out how they can most easily be kept up to date. And so for the people who know, to help the people who don't know as much, right? And so I saw that this article as extremely informative of what certain people are thinking and where their perspectives are. And I think all that says to us is that we have a responsibility to help out one another and make sure that we're on the same page. Because look, at the end of the day, everyone's trying to, I think.
Well, right.
Are each other's best interests in mind.
Yeah. I mean, Jeff Garzik asked me to make a LWN.net for Bitcoin for like 2 years now, and I haven't gotten around to doing it. So it's partially our fault.
I was gonna say, what we need is a decentralized app on Blockstack, right, where people can use their IDs to prove who they are and have a real conversation about the pluses and the minuses of SegWit and Bitcoin Unlimited and things like that, maybe. But basically, just like a place
that would
where
come from a DCG portfolio company. Crazy enough.
And
so that's all it takes.
There you go. It's just something where we, maybe even yours could work, but we just need some place where we can have verifiable identities. I mean, Reddit is just so toxic. It's hard to do that. So when you have something like Blockstack where you can have a verifiable identity, maybe that would help. But yeah, there definitely is a communication issue, and we got to hear from Ansel because he's been waiting. I wanted to get Ansel's opinion on this before we go any further. So go ahead, Ansel. What do you think?
Yeah, I didn't concentrate on the SegWit side of this whole article. I saw it as an unintentional glimpse into the underside of the startup space, right? And what all these CEOs are thinking, what these companies are doing. Like Ryan, I think was touching on there. A lot of them are frustrated. A lot of them are going to fail. And to look at it from the flip side, from what Andrew was saying, is that, okay, yeah, 1 in 10 of the VC's investments are going to be successful, but that means that most likely 90% chance those CEOs are running a failure right now, and they're starting to glimpse that. They're starting to see that they're not going to be able to pivot. So there's a lot of frustration, and they kind of see Classic was like a lifeline, and now Unlimited is kind of like a lifeline to make their startup work. It's not, like I said, I didn't see this as a SegWit article. I just kind of saw it as these guys flailing. These startups are flailing right now. And like Blockstack, the successful startups we're starting to see, instead of, payment centric things, layer 2 solutions. And as this wave of startups dies out, this 90% dies out, then these layer 2 solutions are going to be left behind, and we will have new startups in layer 2s. And if we have 1,000 startups in layer 2, then that's going to push the demand for SegWit and yada, yada, yada. It's a virtuous cycle, and that's kind of what I got from this article.
What you just described there is summarized really well in a book called The Innovator's Dilemma, and they give examples of how this happened in storage space, and it also happened in I think like the plow horse or the cranes, some mechanical thing. This concept of whenever the use case for a particular piece of technology changes to a smaller case or a niche case that someone might not initially see, 90% of the people that are in the space face the innovator's dilemma, which is totally have to wreck your own product and rebuild to handle the next wave of use cases. An example of this is whenever hard drive space, whenever we could make really tiny hard drives for the very first time, people were like, what the hell are we going to do with this? We want more space on these larger drives. But then someone realized we could put these inside of cars and we could have GPS. And then all of a sudden, this entire market for GPS came out, and the 90% that didn't see this use case for that small switch and how a certain piece of technology was used, they were not there whenever the next round of innovations started to happen over the new version of that particular piece of technology. This pattern happens in every piece of technology, and it's something that happens over, fixed sets of time, and you can actually map it out. And if you read The Innovator's Dilemma and you read the Innovator's Solution, and you start to think of Bitcoin scaling in terms of that, you'll be a lot more tolerant for like what people say, just because you'll understand that there's better uses of your time, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that's true.
Before.
That's very interesting. That's true. Ansel, did you have anything else? Want to continue your thought, or?
Well, yeah, I just think it's interesting that how this all ties into the ETF. I think the use case for Bitcoin right now is savings, just stacking as many Bitcoins as possible. And that
stacks on stacks on stacks.
Yeah. And so we can see those 90% are people that were playing with the payment space or whatever they're doing over there. And now we're going to see that the ETF is coming in, and it's not even going to be a little shift. I think it's going to be like, wow, people's eyes opened up. This is money. People want to save in this. This is a safe haven asset. And some people have been saying that since the beginning, obviously. But then we got sidetracked with the whole blockchain meme and all these blockchain assets and stuff like that, where now we're moving back to the sound money aspect of Bitcoin. And that a lot of people got pissed at this article. I was glad it was written. So, Melt Them, I think she has the best intentions with this stuff. And maybe they even meant it to be kind of like that. Like, hey, look, this almost in a sneaky way say, this is what we're seeing, people. This is the way that this is going. The industry is moving, I don't know, just to spread information amongst people. I thought it was good.
Yep. So so let me just quickly talk about a couple of the major problems I had with this article. Just one of them was where they were talking about how SegWit is complex, right? It's really not actually that complex. Like, it's only around 1,000 lines of code, and it's only maybe 7% of the core base, like, that they had to actually change for that. So it's really not. SegWit is not complex itself. Integrating it is definitely not trivial. It's not as easy as it was the previous updates, but still, it's not actually complex. Like Ryan was pointing out earlier, how people don't understand how complex. Even Beauty put this on his article. People don't even understand how complex it is to get that damn green lock on your browser. There is just a huge amount, and if anybody, all the web developers out there, I'm a web developer too, had to work with PayPal or these types of systems, like, it's ridiculous, dude. Passing tokens and all of these different things, like 7 or 8 different steps, and then like you have to run the code on PayPal server to test. It's crazy. It's actually insanely complex. So to put SegWit in kind of a boat of like saying it's complex, it's really not. It's just an upgrade for Bitcoin that needs to happen. And then another problem I had was when they were comparing it with Swift, and it's like, talking about saying that makes they said a little quip that said it makes Swift look attractive, and it's like, come on, dude. In reality, I mean, all week I've been posting these tweets about how these huge, large transactions are being done for pennies. Like I found an $800,000 transaction that was transacted for 40 cents. I found a 600,000 transaction that was transacted for like $1. And like to all of these crazy huge transactions, I mean, you don't have to actually wait very long on TradeBlock to see these transactions come. There's hundreds of thousands of dollars of single transactions that happen every couple seconds. So it's just absolutely crazy the savings that you can have just using Bitcoin as it is right now, even with the rising fees, because the rising fees are going from completely freaking free to pennies and quarters and things like that. So that was also interesting. And of course we can alleviate that with layer 2 technologies, with Lightning and things like that. So maybe just a couple more. They were saying how SegWit was only tested by Core, and it's like that's kind of strange to me, because Core represents basically developer consensus of Bitcoin, because Core is made up of hundreds of developers, the smartest people in the world, pretty much working on Bitcoin. And so to say that it's only tested by Core, that's like saying the internet is only tested by developers. I mean, Core is the developers of Bitcoin, basically the Bitcoin Core protocol. So to have it tested over a year with all of Core is absolutely unprecedented amount of testing for decentralized protocols. Like there's nothing out there, Bitcoin Unlimited, there's nothing out there that has been tested as much as SegWit and peer reviewed as much as SegWit. And you could say that except for maybe the Bitcoin Core code itself, like that's the only other thing. So there's plenty of peer review and it's been plenty of testing. So I want to push back on that a little bit. And then finally, I just wanted to say that, like everybody else kind of echoed here, what they say ultimately, right, doesn't matter, because what matters is if you're running a node and you're signaling and, the community itself, that's what matters. Bitcoin is the miners, the nodes, the exchanges, the wallets, the consensus is what matters. So if the consensus wants to do something, then it's going to do something regardless of a Medium article. Right. But so I guess wrapping up, I was just disappointed by the lack of understanding of what Bitcoin was, and the lack of understanding of SegWit in this, despite the fact that this is coming from some of the most well-funded, VC people in the space, right? DCG has got to be one of the biggest funded places, one of the biggest funded companies in the Bitcoin space. So just a little bit disappointed with this article, but as everybody said, they definitely said some things that needed to be said, which is great. They gave us an insight into what these CEOs, CFOs, and what these investors are thinking. So that's very good. And I definitely appreciate all the comments from you guys on that. So does anybody else have anything to say for this article?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'll just point out with another thing, which is, there are a few comments that are just like, whoa, like that's a little strange, right? And look, that happens. If you go on Twitter, that happens. If you go on Reddit, that happens. If you go on Facebook, that happens. You can't escape that, no matter what demographic you slice.
Very
right?
true. Very true.
Not like even whatever group of people you pick, and you say like, oh, these are smart people. Like these are, you ask them about anything, politics, whatever, and you will get some weird answers. So I just think there's a law of large numbers here thing where we can. You shouldn't. I don't know. My perspective is just don't get riled up by comments on the internet, and the same thing applies here. So there's a lot of very, very smart people. A lot of people who've looked into this a lot. And there are people who maybe just they got confused, aren't as aware, and that's life. I don't know. That's my view on this.
Yeah, for sure. No, that makes sense. That's a good wrap up for this topic. So we're gonna move on to the next topic here. So if everybody watching the show, we got 40 people viewing, we got conversation happening in the chat. If everybody could go ahead and tweet out and Facebook out the show. I'll let everybody know we're here talking Bitcoin. Hit the like button, hit the thumbs up button, hit the thumbs down button, whatever you like. Really appreciate the feedback and the comments. So we're going to move on to the next topic, which may be the final topic depending on how long the guests have here. But I do want to talk about this a bit. Basically, two of the China's biggest exchanges stopped Bitcoin and Litecoin withdrawals for effectively about a month or so. And so I was wondering from the panelists, like, what do you think this will have effect on the Chinese volume, and what do you think this will have on the effect of Bitcoin in general? what do you think people are thinking? So Ryan, we'll go with you first.
I had to unmute. Thank you.
Yeah, there you go.
So I'm not sure. I don't know whether, like, what's the actual reason that they are closing down temporarily. I don't know if it's the actual stated reason or not, but
well, they're not closing down, right? They're stopping withdrawals.
Yeah, temporary for like a month. Yeah, but then reopening after that. I don't know. It's I don't know. I mean, I don't really have much of a strong opinion on this.
No problem. We can let somebody else answer. Yeah, it's definitely kind of crazy because there's been all sorts of this People's Bank of China information that has been coming out, and so we saw what happened with the price the first time it went down to like over $100 when they first started investigating, and then it recovered, and then it went down again when they were talking about these withdrawals. So it's been a bit of a roller coaster. So Ansel, maybe we'll get your opinion next, and then we'll go with Andrew. What do you think about like these exchanges stopping withdrawals for Bitcoin and Litecoin?
I think it's going to have a pretty big impact in the short term, at least in containing the bubble. But we're gonna keep going up. There's a ton of pressure, right, on the price ETF wise, and just kind of in our bull cycle for Bitcoin. So I think that the price will be held in check by this, but long term, I don't think there's going to be much of an impact. I can see, there's some rumors, unsubstantiated rumors out there that either Huobi or OKCoin are slightly insolvent, and so this was kind of like the PBOC saying, okay, stop, we're going to sort this out, figure out your books, and then go from there. I can see maybe those two merging, or the big three. After this, there'll only be two. That's a possibility. But long term, it's not going to have any impact. And when I mean long term, I mean by the end of this year, because that's pretty.
That's how fast Bitcoin goes, man. Long term is only 12 months away.
Yeah, for trading. One aspect of this that's really interesting, and I don't think anybody really knows what's happening here, is the futures market on OKCoin is dominated by one person. He has 70% of open interest on all of the futures on OKCoin. So that means that he's owning offsetting contracts. He's hedging with long and short. Nobody knows who that is, if it's OKCoin themselves, if it's a miner. I was teasing on Twitter that it could be Jihan from Bitmain. I don't know.
Could be. We don't know.
Yeah, that's the bigger question that I'm watching for the next week or two. If it is net short and he gets liquidated, it could have a huge spike in the price. I don't think that person is net long, but the reverse could also be true. So. Yeah, that's all I have for that.
For sure, yeah. I mean, it's definitely interesting that the People's Bank of China came in. They saw all these things. They did do some useful stuff, like stop the zero fee trading and actually implement fee trading. We saw what that did to the volume, but now we have real volume, right? So they did do some interesting things. So I don't think that they're here to harm the exchanges quite yet. But
I did want to add one thing about how this could affect the miners.
Sure.
Because if the miners are trading on the futures market, or they had coins locked up, how this is going to affect their profitability, et cetera, et cetera. So I think we're going to see China being less important. They've been exposed. They didn't really have all that volume. They do have all the mining, but maybe over the next 2 years we'll see mining get decentralized even more than it is now. And especially when you have Japan opening up to Bitcoin, being very Bitcoin friendly. I don't know if that's going to affect the PBOC. Maybe they'll reverse some of these decisions. Maybe that'll affect their regulation going forward.
Very interesting. Andrew, what do you think about the stopping of these withdrawals?
I think PBOC knows a lot more about Bitcoin than people realize that they know. I think that, if I had to put money down on someone knowing who Satoshi was, I would say that PBOC knows exactly who Satoshi is. So I'm not going to sit here and say that I know what PBOC's doing, because I think PBOC operates at a much higher level than any of us give them credit for. If they're halting withdrawals, that means that the coin can't be stolen from their exchanges right now, and the price is high. And they're likely being heavily targeted with attacks right now. So PBOC's doing something. I'm not PBOC. PBOC knows things I don't know. If PBOC's not doing withdrawals, PBOC's not open to a withdrawal vulnerability, good for PBOC. Everyone that has money with something related to the PBOC that can't withdraw right now can't be hacked, so they're absorbing the gains. Now, obviously, if the price tanks really quickly, they can't get out of that. I'm not tied with the PBOC in any way. And like I said, the PBOC has been present in Bitcoin, whether you realize it or not, for a very long time. I've been translating things from China for years now, and the People's Bank of China knows about Bitcoin. They know about it probably better than the people doing this ETF stuff here in America right now. So I'm not, whatever PBOC's doing, PBOC's doing.
So
That's all
yeah,
I can say about it.
First of all, I love the term PBOC, not to be confused with Tupac, but PBOC is the term. It's definitely an interesting situation because, it feels like fear. It feels like they're scared of something. They can see something coming that we can't. And like you said, Andrew, they are at the top of the game, right? In the world of Bitcoin, they know more than anybody else knows, like by far and away. And if they are halting withdrawals, they either, in my opinion, foresee something coming, whether that's good or bad, but they foresee something. It could be it could be the ETF that's going to rise the prices, and like you said, they're going to get attacked or people are going to withdraw. So this actually effectively keeps the Bitcoin price kind of high because it stops people from withdrawing. So this actually effectively kind of keeps the liquidity and keeps the price of Bitcoin up, which is also interesting. So that could be part of their play, but it's definitely because of something that we don't know, or else they would have told us. If they would have said, "Oh, look, there's." Yeah. Because
I mean, like,
if they would have,
whatever PBOC's doing, PBOC's doing.
And it seems like they would have announced something if there was a problem. Like, if let's say, like, okay, this exchange got hacked, so we have to stop the withdrawals. Or they could have made some kind of announcement like that. Like, something happened, okay, so now we have to. But they didn't. They just said, nope, we're stopping withdrawals because we said we're stopping withdrawals. They really didn't give a reason, right?
And they can do
AML. They said it was AML.
Oh yeah, AML.
Get people KYC'd on the exchanges, and that's why they were halting the withdrawals. I mean, it could be an excuse, obviously, but
for sure. And that's another big point too, is that it seems like they are going to that PBOC is very much cracking down on AML KYC. I think by the end of this year, all of the major Chinese exchanges will be 100% KYC AML like Coinbase. I mean, literally, like, if you don't live in freaking China, you probably won't, or have a bank account in China, you probably won't be able to be trading on these exchanges, because it seems like they're very much cracking down because, it could be because of capital flight. I mean, the rise of Bitcoin is continuing, and they see that. Remember, they know more than us, so they know that the price is going to go up soon. So, it seems like they're trying to put the clamp on now, right, as soon as possible on that KYC clamp.
That would go opposite a lot of their stuff they've been doing with, say, the gold exchange. Now they have the Shanghai Gold Exchange. They're kind of opening up, wanting to get the trading happening in Shanghai, right? Or Beijing. They want their place to be the center of the financial world. So I don't think they would close down, at least restrict access.
They have remember, they have much more control over that, right, than they do of Bitcoin.
Yeah, I mean, the only reason why Americans can't trade there is because of the American government, not because of the Chinese government.
True. And so, yeah, it's just, and it could be influences from Western, people too, to tell them, look, you got to KYC your stuff. But yeah, it's just very interesting that they cite AML as the reason. But in my opinion, I think they are going to begin cracking down further on AML and KYC on those exchanges. Now, in the long term, or in the short term, I really don't think that's going to affect Bitcoin too much. I think it's, if anything, it's going to prevent crazy things from happening, like crazy hacks and crazy liquidation, causing market-wide effects of pricing either going down or up. So, I think, again, this is probably going to be overall good for Bitcoin. Like, initially, it shocked the market. The market wasn't happy with it. But as you can see, it's coming back, and we're over 1,000 again. So I think the market understands now that this is probably good for Bitcoin. it remains to be seen, of course, only time will tell, but it's more than likely probably going to be good. So it's just crazy that because we're so used in the crypto space to recognize when withdrawals start being halted, there's something going wrong, right? There's either a fractional reserve, somebody got hacked. If MTGOX tells us anything, that's kind of what everybody remembers.
Bank holiday.
Yeah, exactly. That's what everybody remembers. Like when MTGOX stopped halting withdrawals on dollars. Okay, that was freaking scary. Then they stopped halting withdrawals on Bitcoin, and oh my God, at that point, if you weren't out on Bitcoin at that point, then if you weren't out of the MTGOX at that point, then you were definitely taking huge amounts of risk. So I personally got out when they stopped halting withdrawal of dollars, and that's when I was like, all right, that's crazy, I'm out. And 6 to 9 months later, they stopped Bitcoin withdrawals, and then of course a few months later they were all so. Very interesting stuff. It's probably going to be most likely be good for Bitcoin. So in the long term again, so it's going to be fun to see. But definitely worth talking about because there's definitely probably some people that are upset, right? That have Bitcoin on that exchange that now can't withdraw. So we'll have to see what the market thinks. But very interesting stuff. Does anybody else have anything else to add on this? We lost Andrew. Hopefully he'll be back in a second. So that was good. Well, I guess we do have one more topic. Do you guys have time for one more topic?
I need to take off here in a few minutes.
Okay, yeah. So we probably end it. Yeah, no problem. Everybody's got to get going, and so that's cool. So I just wanted then let us end the show then. So guys, thanks so much for joining us. We had a great time. We talked a lot about a lot of stuff about Bitcoin, the ETF, China stopping withdrawals, the digital currency group. So really had a good time. Really appreciate everybody that could join us. We learned a lot about Blockstack. That is really going to be interesting in the coming years to pay attention to all of these decentralized application platforms. But now Blockstack really I'm liking because there's no token, man. There's no freaking token, and that just something about that excites me when probably it shouldn't, right? If there was a token, it should excite me more that I could buy in. But no, this excites me more that there is no token because it's about the science. So that's really important for people to understand. So that's really cool. So thanks so much, Ryan, for joining us, man. We had a great time.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks so much.
Hey, back.
Andrew dropped out, but yeah, Andrew, we're gonna end the show. Ansel and Ryan got to get going, so we're gonna end the show. So thanks so much, Andrew, for joining us as well, man. Hopefully we can have you back next time. You had some great commentary, and we'll see if we can maybe get you a regular on the show. I don't know, man, because it's good stuff. I like your commentary. So thanks everybody. Thanks to the guests. Thanks to everybody in the chat room. First, we'll ask Ryan, where can we find you?
So you can find me on Twitter. I'm at Ryan E. Shea, RyanESHEA. Also, you can go to blockstack.org and you can come chat with me in the Slack and the forum. I'm there all the time. We have tons of people in the community if you have any questions, you want to do something awesome, you want to start a namespace, you want to use the command line interface, you want to register names, you want to build an application, you want to try out an early version of the browser that we're coming out with for this new internet that we're building. If you want to do any of those things, you want any help at all, come and talk to me, come to talk to my co-founder Manib, come talk to any of the other people in the Blockstack community. So you can find me there, and also join our mailing list. We have, you can join it at blockstack.org, and then we just send out updates, and you can hear about anything that's going on. Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm looking forward to downloading a browser in maybe EXE format instead of having to build it myself in Node. That would be cool to be able to just double click.
We're working on it.
I know. Awesome, man. Awesome. So that's going to be good stuff. Browsing the decentralized internet. Very cool. Ansel, where can we find you, sir?
On Twitter at Ansel Lindner. Also do podcast Bitcoin and Markets. So bitcoinandmarkets.com. This last episode, we talked a lot about Swift and Japan, and also Italy and France with their kind of elections coming up this year. So check that out.
Yeah, very cool. Ansel just recently broke up his podcast into different parts for the Patreon members. So you can get even more on Bitcoin and Markets if you sign up for his Patreon account. So definitely get on that if you guys find that stuff interesting. Very cool. Bitcoinandmarkets.com. Great podcast. Andrew DeSantis, where can we find you, sir?
At atd.id over Blockstack and on the blockchain.
There you go. There you go. What about your Twitter account, man? What's the Twitter account?
Oh, it's DeSantis, but I don't really care too much for Twitter. I'll be there, but I won't be there forever.
All right. Yeah. No. I don't think any of us, any of the hardcore.
When the next decentralized Twitter gets built on Blockstack, then everyone's going to be going to att.id to message Andrew, and they're going to be going to Ryan.id to message me. So, you know.
Absolutely. So that's the goal, man.
That's
you
where
know,
you
to
can find
get
me with if you're not thinking about, if you're not worried about time. If you see without time, atd.id. If you need to yell at me right now, I'm at Twitter, and yell at me there all you want. Put as much spam as possible on that site. I could care less.
Yeah, also because all the identity proofs, you can link your Twitter and link your Facebook and link your GitHub, and we're gonna have Instagram and Snapchat and Stack Overflow and AngelList and Reddit and all these other proofs later. So you can just go to your Blockstack ID, and then you'll know all of the sites where you can find someone. So
absolutely. And of course, that is an identity that you own, can back up and download, put in a safe. So very cool stuff, guys. Looking forward to talking with you guys more. So find us on Twitter. You can find me at the One Vortex on Twitter. You know, right now, we'd love to have the decentralized internet be here right now, but for now, Twitter really is one of the best places, in my opinion, to talk about Bitcoin and blockchain stuff. So definitely follow these guys on Twitter. They have lots of good information, lots of analysis. So very cool. So thanks so much, guys, for joining us again. Until next, we'll be here 2 weeks again from 2 weeks from now. I believe that we will have Samson Mao on the next episode, and then eventually we got to get Christy Rose and his gang over here to talk. That should be an interesting conversation. We'll try to keep the fart jokes to a minimum when he gets on. So, so thanks so much, guys, for joining us. I had a great time. Until next time, just keep on talking Bitcoin. We'll see you guys in 2 weeks. Bye.